Hello, and on to the next shape in our modal odyssey. So I'm going to go just quickly recap what we did. So we did first chord, major, second chord, that's minor, Dorian, third chord, so we've got our Phrygian, fourth chord, that's the Lydian, and we're on to another new scale shape with the fifth chord, which is major as well. Now this chord is really important in music because when you harmonise the major scale and you add sevenths to it, the other two major chords harmonise as major sevenths, so you got that nice jazzy sound. But when we get to the fifth chord and we try and add a seventh to that, we get our dominant seventh sound. So that's something to be aware of. So it's slightly different from the other ones. So let's have a look at our point of references again. So our point of references. So we've gone third fret, third fret to fifth fret, seventh, eighth. So on the 10th fret. So first reference is obviously our major bar chord shape. If we're going to make that into a seventh chord, it's going to be a dominant seventh, and we can add this note here as well if we're on the high note. So that's the chordal frames of reference. Obviously you want to get your F shape in there and just be aware that is where the seventh note is. Yeah. So, okay. So again, that F shape is always useful for me because your hand is always in that kind of position when you're soloing. So to visualize that shape is really, really useful. So again, we want to take our point of reference. So as it's a major chord, we're going to expect some sort of scale that's similar to the major scale. So the major scale is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then to the octave. That's your intervals. So for the Mixolydian scale, basically the easiest way to think of it is a major scale with a flattened seventh. So we're all right up to here, and then this note changes. So I'm just going to play it in one octave first. So you have your first, you got your second, you got your third, fourth, fifth, sixth, flattened seventh, and then you got your octave. And then the same applies again. First, second, third, fourth, then you got your fifth, your sixth, your flattened second, and then your octave. So it fits around this chord. So when you play the scale shape, you should be able to see, if I play the seventh chord, that's the flattened seventh there, and it's there. So in terms of frets, in this position we're talking 10, 12, 9, 10, 12, 9, 10, 12, 9, 11, 12, 10, 12, 13, 10, 12, and if we wanted to extend we could go to 14. So in terms of fingering, when I get to the higher extensions, I want to go for my 3 finger rule. So if we think of it in terms of our exercise that we've been doing, so you can break it down. You've got the first two notes, then you get to here. So 1, 2 and 4. So we've got our exercise yet again. And then when we get to here, we've got our exercise, but it's going to be first finger, second finger and third finger. That's my preferred combination. You have to jump up one fret to get that, but basically it's the same exercise. I mean, you could do it with your, but when you're this high up the fretboard, for me, you know, it's useful to practice those combinations, but I would be going with this combination. So again, we can break this shape down into the exercise that we looked at the beginning. So this is first, second, fourth. Then we can break it down into first finger, second finger, third finger. Jump up a fret. So it's useful to practice breaking the scale down into those units. And then for our last bit, I prefer to use my first finger, my second finger, my little finger to get that high note. So that's one way of breaking it down. We can break it down into those shapes. So also you should be able to go through it slowly and name the intervals. So I'm going to do that as well. So first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, flat and seventh, octave. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, flat and second, octave. So you should be able to play it slowly, breaking it down by intervals, and then you can play it as a loop as well. Etc, etc. So you could loop it, playing all the notes, but you should be able to play it slowly and break it down into its intervals. So this scale is used a hell of a lot, and it's probably one of the most used modes out there. You find it a lot in jazz and blues, but in some more surprising kind of places as well. So I'm going to give you a couple of musical examples. Now the key thing to note, because it is based around the fifth major chord, the fifth chord, which is a major chord in the scale, quite often chord progressions that feature this kind of sound will just jump up and down between the two major chords in the parent key. So we're in the key of G, but you get a lot of riffs that just jump between these two chords, but this one would be the home chord. So in the previous example where we looked at the Lydian, that was the home chord and everything was gravitating back towards the fourth chord as the home chord. But in the case of the Mixolydian, you'll see the same kind of chord progression, but the home will definitely be the fifth chord. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So I'm going to go down to A, where A Mixolydian would be. And LA Woman is the first song I always think of when I think of the Mixolydian mode. Basically it kind of chugs along on the A. And then you hear him sing, and then it suddenly goes down to the fourth chord, which is G. So basically it just chugs along on that chord, occasionally going back to the fourth chord, and the melody is pure Mixolydian on the lead line. So again, oops, so. Then it just, and that note there would be the seventh. And it plays, I haven't got the melodies quite right there, but you can see it's that kind of thing that he plays, and it's based on this, it's this Mixolydian kind of sound. So it gives you a kind of it's like a bluesy sound, but it's a more exotic bluesy sound. So if you've got a dominant seventh, little things that you can note, you can also get away with playing a pentatonic over that chord. And quite often what you'll find is when people are playing a Mixolydian sound, they'll sneak in a pentatonic over the top of it, a minor pentatonic that is, and you can kind of move between the two scales. So way into, so if you're playing a minor pentatonic, then you could just hammer in there, and suddenly you're in your Mixolydian scale. Or we could slide up here. So basically what the difference is, you've got a minor third, and you can play with moving it up to a major third. And even if you don't use the Mixolydian, it's quite a common move in blues is to bring in that note, the major third. To resolve a phrase. So as I say, so when soloing, you've got a dominant seventh, a really useful approach is to play your minor pentatonics, and then you can play the Mixolydian mode over it, and it kind of works. So you've got that kind of idea you can do, but don't think that this mode is just like a jazz rock kind of mode. I mean, you do find it in jazzy kind of rock, but you also, I mean, quite surprisingly, it sounds kind of Indian as well. So the song that I'm thinking of is on the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Within Without You. So. So you can get a kind of Indian sound. Now, another little tip, if you really like that Indian sound, is you can miss some notes out and get this Indian sounding kind of scale that's based around this position as well. So what you can do is you play the first, then you skip the second, and you skip the sixth, and you get this Indian sounding scale. So you're playing the first, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the seventh, and the octave. First, first, third, fourth. You got your fifth, seventh, and octave. So that gives you another little sound that you can experiment around with. So you could just set up a dominant seventh type drone, and and then practice, as I say, so you've got 3, you could practice, you've got your blues scale or your pentatonics over it. You can bring in your Mixolydian mode, and then you can also bring in your weird Indian pentatonic. So that gives you a few possibilities. Now, when using this scale in a blues, you can't really use it to blanket the sound. So if you're going to try it over a blues, then you need to chase the chord around. So say we're in A, and then it moves up to D, and then you've got your turnaround would go to E to D. Now notice they're all dominant 7th chords, so what you'd have to do is you'd have to chase the chord around. So I'm using my D Mixolydian there, and it goes back. Okay, now for the turnaround. So I went into E Mixolydian, D Mixolydian, so for the turnaround, basically, so E Mixolydian, D Mixolydian, A Mixolydian, then I slipped in a bit of the blues scale because you can use that to blanket the sound when there's stuff going on in the blues. So so it gives you another option to soloing over the blues, and it gives you a bit more of a sophisticated sound than just sticking to the blues scale. But you've got to be able to chase the chords around. But that's why, for me, it's very useful to, basically I'm visualising this F shape when I'm because that's my hand position when I'm soloing. I move up to here, and I can see the chord around, the scale around this chord, and up here. So I can always visualise this scale sat around as I'm chasing the chords around. So that's why I keep going on about these points of reference, but it's very useful to be able to see them and relate them to a chord, and then you can chase a chord progression around and start implying the sounds that you like over specific chords, and that's obviously getting into the realms of jazz or blues. But as I say, but you can get an exotic Indian sound out of it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, just this jazz blues kind of scale. But there's several other examples that use it. Dark Star by the Grateful Dead. And I found there's a jam track on that. And that's just based in A Mixolydian. So you could, get that playing and just jam to your heart's content over that using the scale. And I'm trying to think of other examples. I suppose War Pigs by Black Sabbath. And another one that I found out today was Clocks, which I never realised, by Coldplay. Something like that. And that's just basically going D, A minor to E. And what gives it away that it's a Mixolydian sound? If we have a quick look at our D chord, and then the next chord is A minor. And if we have a look at this note here, and we play a D7, we can see that this note is in the D7. So we're playing D, and then imagine if you were playing a D7, we're not actually going to play it, and then we move our fingers to the minor chord. That's why it's a Mixolydian chord progression, because it's not, if it was a major chord progression, it would need to have a major 7th in it, but it hasn't. When it moves to the next chord, in relation to the D chord, that would be the flattened 7th. So if I was to do that as bar chords, basically that would be our So if you see a chord, a major chord, and then it goes to a minor chord here, the chances are it's going to be a Mixolydian type chord progression. One thing to bear in mind though, I mean, if you want to play that song, it's got a capo on the first fret and you'd need to change the key. Now I'll just give you one other example, All Blues by Miles Davis, and that's another Mixolydian type vamp, and this one goes, that should be, so basically what it's doing is it's you've got your dominant seventh chord, play a bar there, then it goes into a minor chord, and it's the same idea as the Coldplay tune we just looked at. You've got this same movement, from here to a minor chord here, and that minor chord has got one of the notes that lands on the flattened seventh. So that's why it's a Mixolydian chord progression. And then for the rest of the song, it just basically does the same thing on the next thing in C. So that's basically how that one works, but you can see it's this movement to the minor chord there from there indicates that you've got a Mixolydian mode to contend with. So yeah, so that's my musical examples. Have fun with that, and this one's really worth getting your fingers around because it comes up a lot. And then we've just got one more to go, so we're nearly there.